Let's dive in. Well, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining our, Graham, 11th webinar that we've done together. The focus today, separating the AI hype from reality in procurement. So this is our last webinar of 2023, obviously. And our focus today is a topic that's really on everybody's minds. And it's one that has, I think, if you followed the news in any level of detail, in the last several years, it's been the topic of the moment. And certainly in the last year, as Chat GPT came out, this whole topic of AI has been front and center in the news. And specifically, the rise of Chat GPT has really catapulted AI into the limelight. And I think it's got everybody's imagination. And so no surprise, businesses across the globe are trying to figure out what the implications are, right, on their operations. And procurement's no exception. For those of you, anybody who goes to any conference will see that the topic of AI is front and center, and products and solutions that are embedding AI into what they're delivering are prominent. So, of course, in the middle of all this excitement, CPOs are trying to figure out really how to answer a specific question, which is, how can AI practically benefit my organization today, especially as I'm confronting the challenges of not just 2024, but beyond that as well. Also, no surprise, there is no shortage of hype around the topic. I've said this to a bunch of different folks that we're probably in an era of peak hype when it comes to AI and Gen AI in particular. And there's no shortage of promises that are being made. But I would suggest from a practical reality perspective, we're not quite there yet, right? At least in the way that we tend to think of this romantic idea of what AI is, right? I'm not even talking about AGI, I'm talking about just even more narrow AI specifically. So the question that we're going to grapple with today in our conversation is, how do you separate and understand what is real from what is not? And that's really what we're going to focus the next, about an hour or so talking about. Now, to do this, we put together an esteemed panel, as always. I'm going to let everybody do introductions of their own in a second, but we're joined by three individuals: Raul Groening, who is the head of procurement and operations at Allianz; Ashish Gupta, who leads the procurement excellence team at Clorox; and as always, my friend, the inimitable Graham Crawshaw, who is the procurement content director and board member at CASME. So panelists, could you please introduce yourselves? Raul, I'll start with you over in Switzerland.
Yeah, hi, I'm Raul. I have now 20 years of experiences in the area of procurement, operations, and finance. I worked in global organizations for Siemens, for Continental. Currently, I'm serving in IT procurement. I'm the head of accelerated procurement. And yeah, I've done a lot of experiments in the last 12 months, mainly based on Chat GPT and some other generative AI. And I'm happy to share this knowledge here. And as well, I would like to add one small thing which could be relevant as well for our discussion. I'm as well lecturer at the Kaleidos University, and we have done a partnership with the university and Allianz to investigate some use cases for procurement.
That's fantastic. We're going to be looking forward to hearing a lot from you as we talk about some of these really pressing questions that we're dealing with. Ashish, please.
Thanks, Omar, for having me here. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Ashish Gupta. I lead procurement excellence at Clorox. And for those who don't know, Clorox is a CPG company. We are headquartered in Oakland, California. And we have a global portfolio of diverse brands such as Clorox, Brita into water filtration, Bird Bees into natural personal care, and so on. I have a diverse background in software development, program management, business operations, and work across different procurement roles across the globe. I define my procurement journey as from washing machine to self-driving car. Currently, I am a student of AI. I'm learning what it can do and what Omar said, like what's real and what's the hype. So looking forward for discussion today.
Yeah, and Ashish, I think it's fair to say we're all, at this point, we're all students of AI, given how early in the cycle we actually are in terms of what's there. But thanks for joining and excited to hear from you as well. Graham?
Hi, great to be here. As you've gathered now, Procurement Content Director at CASME, the global procurement community. And really, I'm here to represent the views of the 240 global organizations that make up the CASME membership, sharing some of the benchmarking that we've done and some of the ideas. So looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, great. And I'm Omar Abdullah. I'm the co-founder of the Smart Cube. I focus on our procurement business. I've been working in this space for, gosh, not to date myself, but 30-ish years. So seen a lot in the space as well. So excited to have this particular conversation today. So thanks again, panelists, for being here. So as we talked about, the goal of our conversation, the topic is going to be around AI and its role in procurement today and in the future. And we're going to organize this conversation around in four parts, right? So what we'll do is we're going to do a few polls, which we're going to dive into in just a second, but we'll go through each of those questions and then have the panelists share their perspectives as we go through it. So question number one, how is AI changing procurement today, right? So what are we seeing? Number two, how will AI's current transformative impacts alter the focus and actions of the procurement team in the next 12 months? So in other words, what is the focus in the very near term, if you will, in 2024? Question number three will be, what are the medium to really long-term implications of AI, and what does that future hold? And then question number four, which I think is we're just beginning to get our heads around this, because I think it's going to be probably the biggest point, is what does all of this mean? Well, what does this future mean for the organization, for the procurement organization, for our teams, for their roles, and what they're going to be doing? So I think that's a pretty important area for us to look at and better understand. But let's dive into these questions one by one. And before I do that, let's start off with a poll question, Graham, shall we? So poll number one.
There we go, first poll. So to set the scene, and as we've got 200 people on the call now, it's a great way to get that advice and feedback. How prepared is your organization regarding the adoption of AI for procurement activities? And you can select one of the options that we've got here for you. Some, I would agree, bit tongue-in-cheek, but first of all, already implemented for many procurement activities, already implemented for a few procurement activities, exploring the options, and also not yet considering. So we've got that full spectrum of possibilities, and we really want to get a feel as to where you sit on that. So we're just going to give it a few more seconds. I can see we're up to 70% of you already responded. You've only got to hit one of the options. We keep it nice and straightforward. Let's, in the interest of time, I think we're doing well in terms of the responses there. Let me share the results. And 50% of you are exploring the AI options. Further 21% preparing and getting ready for implementation, and 15% already implemented, and then 13% not yet considering. So a full range, just probably as we would expect, but the majority, or 50% of you anyway, exploring the options. So yeah, it sounds perfect that you're here today. Let me stop sharing.
Interesting. So 71% are either exploring or preparing for adoption, which in a way I'm not surprised about, given that we're in the early days of all of this, but I'm also a little surprised that that it's 50% exploring. But interesting. Raul and Ashish, your thoughts. Does that resonate? Does that kind of make sense, surprise you? I mean, Ashish, maybe we'll start with you.
I think it very well resonates. We are more into an exploration phase. We are curious, but we are cautious also around AI. So very well resonates the way I'm thinking about it.
Curious but cautious. I like that. I like that phrase. Raul, your thoughts?
Yeah, if I see our organization, I can for sure say that in January and February, when there was a big hype, everyone tried something out. And if I look today, there are a few people who stayed and still trying out and find some great solutions. But I would say we have for sure lost half of the people saying, okay, I was not able to enter the system. I'm talking about Chat GPT here. And then they said, okay, it's over. I don't try it again. So I think it will come back more and more if the people can really see what is the benefit for them in their actual day work.
Yeah, I think as it gets more and more embedded into our everyday, the tools that we utilize, both in our personal and professional lives, I think we'll see. I agree with you. I think there was a lot of issues or perceived issues early on with Chat GPT. Actually, not just perceived and actual issues with Chat GPT. And I think we'll see that resurgence. So with that thought, let's go to the first question, which is, how is AI changing procurement today, right? So, and maybe let's think about that in maybe I'll throw out a few questions and feel free to pick on whichever ones you want to focus on, which is, what do you see as the role AI is playing today when it comes to procurement in particular? Where are the practical applications and how real is it to you in what you're trying to do? So Raul, maybe we'll kick off with you. You've done a bunch of experimentation in this area. Your thoughts, what do you see as the role AI is playing today in procurement?
Yeah, for me, it's already quite real. Yeah, we are using it every day in our job. And maybe I can give you some examples where we are using it. So on the one side, we use it to enable certain things which we were not able to do before. For example, analyzing huge data bases. And now we can do that in a couple of seconds, or even maybe more crispy for many people. Let's imagine you have a supplier, you never heard about that one. And of course, now you have to make your investigation. What is the supplier about? What is it doing? And maybe do we have already another supplier in our portfolio which would cover the requirements of your internal stakeholder? So today we have developed already since January, and we're using it and improving it continuously, a prompt which we use in Chat GPT, or we are using today Amidst GPT, which is kind of copy of it, where we just put our prompt in. So you can imagine like a template, and then we get out a structured report from Amidst GPT from this supplier, which we haven't been aware a couple of seconds ago. And just in a few seconds, or we have to read it in a few minutes, we know a lot about the supplier. Yeah, and you can go into the call, well prepared, and you don't have to make investigations for hours. Yeah. So this is a very small use case, which is helping us on our daily work.
So that's interesting. I just want to explore that just a little bit more. So one of the big issues that a lot of folks have talked about, and not just in procurement, across the board, when it comes to Chat GPT, is data security and data confidentiality. I'll presume that when you said Amidst GPT, that's really designed to manage that aspect of data security. Is that fair? Can you maybe share a little bit more about your thinking in creating that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything what we put in stays in the, let's say, Allianz Cloud. We are using here Microsoft Azure for that. And nevertheless, the use case which I mentioned can be done anyhow, also in Chat GPT. Because what I do, I just say, give me some examples, or give me the report for Lucid Works, and this is how the report should look like. So I don't give any confidential information from Allianz into the system. So this one, everyone can use it. And I'm also happy to share this prompt. We can put that in the show notes.
Yeah. And how has that been received within the organization as you implemented that?
Yeah, I mean, from the procurement people, some love it. Yeah, they are working on it to improve it, and we customize now for the different categories, and not each report looks the same way. Yeah. Some others tried it, they saw there was a mistake, it's not true what is there, and then they stopped it. Yeah. So it's really those different reactions which we get.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. You were gonna.
Yeah, one interesting thing is I got some weeks ago a call from one of my stakeholders saying, "Hey, there was such a great negotiation one of your guys did." Yeah, I said, "Okay, cool. Yeah, I was happy." And the point why he was so happy was, he even knew that the supplier has some quality issues up from a product which we don't even are interested in. So, okay. Then I did the link to our report where we have a kind of section saying, give me some rumors about the supplier. Are there any quality issues? We have kind of question there. And then he picked out one of these items, and without verifying if it's true, by the way, he just brought it up into negotiation. And by the way, you have quality issues, yeah? And supplier was suddenly in that defense, and our internal stakeholder was impressed. Wow, the guy was so well prepared.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of the value, right? To be and it just makes you more credible in that conversation to have that understanding and that grasp. Ashish, how does this resonate? I guess what's been your experience at Clorox and elsewhere as you look at the landscape in terms of the role it's playing today?
So first of all, let me check. I got a message that audience are not able to hear me. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you. There's maybe there's a bit of clarity issue. I can still make out what you're hearing. Graham, I don't know about yourself. And
yeah, it's not. I must admit, it's not great. Just speak up, and then maybe the microphone will pick it up. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll stay close to the mic.
Yeah.
I'll speak a bit louder, or maybe I can go closer to mic, or I'll bring mic closer to me. So, okay. And just interrupt me if you're not able to hear me. So Mark, that's an interesting question. Like you said, is it real? If you look at last 4 years, positive has become the most negative one, right? And now the question we are asking is artificial real? Is artificial intelligence real? I think it is on the journey of becoming real. And normally, if you see, let me just give a overall first perspective, and then I'll go very specific. If you look at technology shocks that require period of adjustment, but it's very different in case of AI, and especially with the launch of Chat GPT last year. First 2 months, it became fastest growing app, like 100 million users. Today, it is available to more than 1 billion users. So it's already there in the hands and mind of everyone. Look at the word prompt. I mean, Raul was talking about prompt. I just read yesterday, it became one of the finalists in Oxford Word of the Year 2023. So everybody is talking about prompt. So yes, I think it's on the journey of becoming real. I mean, we have reached to a stage whether you love it or you don't love it, but you cannot ignore it. It has become part of our everyday discussion. Now, in terms of the real applications, like I said earlier, we are still in an exploration phase. We are trying to understand what it can do. And especially like Omar, you mentioned about like data security, what are the policies internally as well as with external partners. So we have explored, some use cases through the third-party solutions. For example, in case of a category strategy, can it provide a real-time market information? We are exploring in case of spend analytics also. Can it automate like cleansing, enriching and classifying of data? So we are not yet there. I think we are exploring through third-party applications as well as we are identifying some of the use cases which we want to focus in the coming months and years.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, some of those examples that you mentioned. I think there's a lot of potential, but I still think there's work to be done with the players that are out there and in those spaces as well. What's heartening to me and interesting in this whole area is the fact that we're, if we were having this conversation maybe 2 years ago, I think the emphasis of the conversation would have been on automation, right? I'm using that a little loosely, but broadly on automation of activity, on processes and things like that, and driving efficiency primarily and a little bit of effectiveness. We've now moved that conversation towards, as you both have talked about, whether it's through category strategy activities or details on spend or through Alliance GPT, to synthesizing the data and making sense of it and interpreting it in an interesting way, which I think is a higher order set of activities. That's not a judgment point. That's just in terms of the thinking that's applied to it, there's relatively speaking more thinking that's being applied to it. So I think we're in a pretty interesting space where you can apply AI to do some pretty interesting areas of hence the name, which is how do you mimic human intelligence and make it act and think like a human? So to me, that's where the exciting potential are. But you're right, there have been issues. You put something in Chat GPT at the beginning of this year and you get a whole bunch of hallucinations, right? And you have a whole set of issues. I think that's going to work itself out of the system. Graham, what's the CASME community saying about all of this?
So I think it's right to get it in balance. I think it's one of these things, almost like blockchain was, that loads of hype, everyone's talking about it, and actually not much action. So when we did our benchmarking last month on it, it was again just less than 50% of organizations sort of experimenting or trying to sort of investigate. There is nervousness around data. So you've got very risk adverse functions within the organization saying, oh no, we're not even going to let you have access to Chat GPT just in case you end up putting something that is confidential. So I think there is certainly that risk and that concern at the moment, but there's the appetite. Everyone is very keen to learn and see what actually can be done. So I don't think it'll be long. For those companies that are using it, at the moment, it tends to be where they're using systems that have got an element of AI built into it. So if you're using any of the large ERP systems or any of the large risk management systems, many of them now, the suppliers are saying, yeah, it's got an AI functionality, as opposed to trying to develop some homegrown system. So, I mean, Rahul, I think you're quite advanced in that respect. Most companies aren't at that level of confidence to be able to implement as yet. So worth watching.
It's interesting. You're right. And I think part of that reason is obviously because AI resources, people, are expensive and hard to come by, given the sheer demand. And I'm sure, Ashish and Rahul, you guys are practically grappling with that. We grappled with that ourselves. And we have AI baked into a lot of what we're doing. And those resources are fairly hard to come by as well. The other aspect, I think it's an interesting comparison to blockchain, Graham, where you're right. There was a lot of talk and hype about blockchain, which has kind of died down, relatively speaking. But also, I think, to what Ashish was saying, I think there's a practical reality in that AI, I think, is going to be much more readily adopted and utilized and implemented relative to the idea of blockchain. Because with blockchain, there was a broader sort of, let me just call it an infrastructure question. There's an understanding question of how do I apply it, and then the actual physical applicability of the idea to what we're trying to get done on an everyday basis. Whereas AI, I think, is going to be much more readily implementable. So interesting. So just to keep this moving, in classic to every webinar, we are all already in good conversation and running late. I'm going to go to the second question, which is, how will AI alter the focus? Actually, I don't think we're on the poll yet, Graham.
Oh, sorry.
We'll come back to the poll right after this question, but we'll do it pretty quickly. How will AI alter the focus and actions of the procurement team during the next 12 months? So what kind of AI-supported outcomes will be achieved? What do you think is realistic? What are you seeing in your own companies across the procurement landscape? And Ashish, maybe if we could start with you, what do you think is realistic for folks listening in to expect in the next 12 months?
I think if you look at last 12 months, the next 12 months, AI will move at a rapid pace, really rapid pace. And I would anticipate there will be flood of innovations, especially in the procurement technologies space. Whether we talk about, like I said, spend analytics, contract analytics, supplier discovery, supplier risk management, which is one area of my interest, especially like supply chain monitoring. How we will approach is, I will share one of my favorite quote, which turns out to be my own quote also, is be limitless in your thinking, but be mindful in your execution. So like what I said, we will have we will be curious, but we will have a cautious approach. We will keep track of what's happening, what innovations are happening, what issues are popping up, and then see what can be leveraged to achieve our business objectives. But one thing I want to highlight, especially in the procurement world today, I mean, learning has become the new currency. And this year at Torex, we have launched something called Procurement Academy, So we will identify and invest in the learning opportunities, to upscale our teams. Absolutely. So that is something which we are looking for next 12 months. What is realistic? I think we talked about, we talked about like driving value through automation of repetitive tasks. I think automation is already there, but with use of AI, it will move much, much faster. The other thing which I hope and will become real is analyzing the data for the procurement data. So today we have a lot of data, we have dashboards, and I always say like maybe AI will help us to Google our dashboards, to Google our data and provide information in the way we want and when we want. So there will be a lot of conversational platforms. We talk about chatbots, we talk about virtual assistants. So that's what I am hoping to see in next 12 months. But one more thing, which will be very interesting, is more on the regulation side, and we are anticipating EU AI Act, coming next year. And when that comes, will AI become a regulated product? And if AI becomes a regulated product, what will be the impact of that in the overall ecosystem? So a lot of things for the next 12 months.
Gosh, there's two things specifically. There's a lot of things you picked up on. I think to me, this idea of virtual assistants is a really interesting one. Really, really interesting one. And how are some of these virtual assistants going to really enable us to do so much more than we ever thought was possible? Save us, I was going to say save us time. Yeah, there's a saving time element, but it's saving time and getting synthesis, understanding, which is not just about, yes, it's about saving time, but it's more than that, right? So to me, that's a really, really interesting piece, and how we're going to use tools today. For example, I was listening to something just the other day where they talked about, we use Google as if it's second nature today, but there's a big chunk of folks who are not even using Google as their go-to to get questions answered. They go right to Chat GPT. And then they don't have 6 articles to go through. They have basically a paragraph that they can read through, or 2 paragraphs, and that tells them what they need to know. So what does that mean for all of these players that are doing things today in a particular way, and how's that going to change? So this whole idea of virtual assistants, and more broadly, is going to be an interesting one. The second one is regulation, which is going to be really interesting, right? I know there's a lot of talk about containment and slowing things down. I honestly, I don't see how that's going to happen. I think the genie's out of the bottle. So we're moving at a rapid pace, and it's only going to get faster. But I do think we need some smart folks in government to begin to think about this, to put some guardrails, ideas, policies, or whatever it might be, to try and manage that. Although I don't think, I think containment is an interesting idea. I think it's a little too strong of a word. Go on.
Sorry, can I make an additional comment on when you mentioned about virtual assistant? When we look for technology or any tool, I mainly consider 2 criteria. One is experience, and second is subtraction. So experience means how this technology or tool can either improve or enhance the experience. And virtual assistant is one example. The subtraction piece is what we can do less and have more impact. How this application or solution will take some of the tasks so that we can focus on the tasks which has much more greater impact.
Yeah, I 100%. How do you augment your experience and drive that value? Raul, your thoughts? I mean, I know we sort of went into a tangent around virtual assistants and regulations, but you can speak to that, or you can speak to the broader point, which is, what do you think is realistic? What do you expect to see in the next 12 months as well?
Yeah, I would like as well to add something to this virtual assistant, or I call it the buyer assistant. So I think in the next 12 months, every one of us can have assistant for just a specific task, or some other assistance for broader tasks. And I would like to give you an example from one of my students. He wrote 4 exams in my classes, and the last one, a couple of weeks ago, he was brilliant, and the other ones, he was really average. I asked him, hey, how have you done that? And he told me, well, I learned a lot. I said, no, I don't, I was not so sure. And then he said, okay, I will show you, but you are not allowed to, change my average. I said, okay. And he showed me how he did that. He did that based on Chat GPT. you can build now your own bots. Yeah, what does it mean? You need the premium version, okay, but you can take the chatbot GPT and add some additional information. Yeah, for example, he recorded all my classes, my voice. He put that in a transcription tool. So then afterwards he did a summary, gave it to the bot. He put all my the readings which I gave them, and suddenly he had an assistant which helped him in the exam. Yeah, which was, according to the rules, not okay, but nevertheless I found that really cool, and I asked him to give me now this bot. And yeah, I'm developing now for each of my classes a specific bot which helps now the students in their learning, and as well when they make case studies. So if you see this, which works in a very easy way at university, we can implement that the same concept in our company.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And it just goes back to this point around regulation. It brings up broader questions around intellectual property, how you go about processing, and down to, and I don't want to take this that far, but more broader points around what is education going forward, right? And what does it mean to teach, and what does it mean to learn? So, but again, let's not go through that. That's probably another 4-hour webinar that we can get into. But that's a fascinating example. It's a great example. So when it comes to like these buyer assistants and even beyond that, how are you sort of thinking about the next 12 months? For example, at Allianz, I mean, what's your expectation? What's your hope for the next 12 months, I guess?
Yeah, that we get this hurdle, that we are allowed to use those chatbots tools to build our own ones, and that really we can get this done for us. And mention that we just take all our meetings, we make our transcripts, we have a Copilot that's quite easy, and we load that in this pilot, in this assistant, which gets more and more knowledge, and suddenly you can ask as well, you can upload as well your procurement guideline, which often are many pages long for big companies. And then suddenly this chatbot knows better the procurement guideline, all other guidelines than any other employee in the company. And then you can give that, and we are working on that at the moment, to have a guided buying bot. If internal customer wants to buy something, and sometimes not so easy in a big company to know who's the one in charge. Should I even make a new request, or do we have already a solution in place, maybe even with the same supplier? And then the bot will give you the information without that the requester is sending any email out. So this one, I think it's realistic to get that in the next 12 months.
And that's, we're going to get in this when we get to question 4, which is that if you carry it out to its logical extreme, which I think is very realistic, it has a lot of real fundamental implications for what the procurement organization and the constituent roles within it are going to look like. Maybe not in 12 months, but certainly a little bit in 12 months, but certainly as we get to the medium and long term, which I think is transformative in terms of what it means. Graham, are you hearing similar themes like this as you look at the community?
Well, funny if I am, and chatbots are right at the top of the list. So it seems to be, I think, the most cost-effective and easier and more allowable to work and develop a chatbot to support procurement than probably many other areas. So that's interesting that that Raoul mentions that. I would say the other areas that are actually being used at the moment, they're quite very much supporting tactical procurement, which I think is quite interesting. And I know it's all about data crunching and making it easier to process that. But I think, that short term is very much the support of tactical procurement, whether it is, as we've been talking about, spend analytics, invoice processing, compliance, supplier onboarding. I think we're not going to, we'll cover the longer term in a bit, but short term, very tactical, and chatbot's definitely a good one to start. If you've got a bit of money, bit of budget to spend, then it's a very cost effective way to move things forward for the function.
Yeah, and that resonates. Look, I was making notes as I was preparing for this conversation today. Everything that everybody has mentioned, more chatbots, more intelligent chatbots, which translates to these virtual and buyer assistants, contract analytics, spend analytics, pulling together different processes and making more sense of them versus simply not just driving efficiency, but extracting the insight from the data that brings together. I think these are interesting and practical areas that are within reach. So just so that's super interesting. So we've talked about kind of how AI is changing procurement today. It's real, it's happening. It's going to be cautious and measured, certainly, as we look to implement this and manage all of the security and related issues that are there around that, as well as the still developing quality aspects around different AI tools that are there. I want to kind of move to the medium to long-term implications, but before I do that, Graham, can we put up poll number 2?
Yeah, let's do the poll, as I got it wrong last time. So here we want to get from you. There's 212 people on the call. Which 3 procurement processes in your organization are most likely to benefit from the implementation of AI? So you may not have done it as yet. It may be part of the work you're exploring, but which 3? And yeah, just sort of read down the list, but very briefly, we've got spend analytics, we've got demand forecasting, strategy development, supplier discovery, RFX execution, supplier evaluation, negotiation processes, purchase order processing, invoice processing, contract management, and supplier relationship management. So the full gambit of procurement activity, and I guess we're just keen in to get your views on where can AI help the most. So I see 50% of you have responded very quickly, which is good. Just add 3. I know you could add more. Zoom's not that sophisticated, but we want to really pick up on where's the short-term trend on this one. So in the interest of time, I'm going to actually end the poll there, give last few seconds for people still deciding. We've got some very sort of common themes coming out. So let me share the results now. And no surprise, we've got a consistency here. Spend analytics right at the top of the list. You've got to look at the longest bar. The percentages don't mean anything because you've added more than 1. Followed by contract management, followed by supplier discovery. So again, all those that we've been mentioning, and also confirming where we've been talking about the more tactical, that's coming out on this. Supplier relationship management, much further down the list. So I think we've got an interest in getting very tactical, very operational challenges addressed by AI, which arguably makes perfect sense. Homer, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think, large troves of data in those big ticket areas, those are perpetual problems. I remember the first sourcing assignment I did back in 1995, not to date myself, but I was struck by the fact that it was a multi-billion-dollar corporation that didn't have its spend sorted out, which was always amazing to me. But we're still there today. We're still there in many organizations grappling with that spend issue. Certainly contract analytics, we've talked about that today as well. Raul and Ashish, does that resonate with you guys? Does that make sense? Ashish, I saw you nodding your head as the results came up.
Yes, absolutely. I'm talking about really analyzing vast amount of data. So spend analytics is not a surprise. Contract is not a surprise, where we are looking for solution which can quickly analyze terms and conditions to uncover some insights as well as drive some actions also. So yeah, very well resonates with results. Yeah.
Raul, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, same. I can fully understand that. I mean, at the end, it's the improvement of data quality, which the AI can help us a lot. And then based on that, as well, analyzing big data chunks. Even if to say that I hope, I think we have already great tools to analyze data. So yeah, it could help, but for me, this is not the priority, because I can already use tools which are in place already today.
Yeah.
So I would see more things in the area, or for me, it's more fascinating. How can it help us in negotiations? Yeah. The first step, like we said, the next 12 months, we have an assistant who helps us to analyze. And the negotiation gives us a hints. But okay, we come to the question later, right? For the outlook for the future. But there I see more potential, that he really takes over the negotiation, and that we are engineering the bot, that we get a great output. And the same might happen on the other side. Yeah, I mean, the sales guys are also not sleeping. They also are investing a lot of time in AI, and so they're even faster than us. And just one example, they can analyze very easily who we are. Yeah, already today, just going into LinkedIn and get some information. But if you have more and more data sources, and also voice bots are very interesting in that area, which are with AI. So they could even analyze my voice. I'm nervous at the moment or not. I'm comfortable or not. And then you can get percentages. Oh my God, Raul is saying 80% probability that what he's saying now is not the truth. Yeah, and then suddenly you get some information, which, by the way, from the technologies already possible today, and we are using something like that, not for negotiations, but for other purposes at Allianz. Yeah? Voice bots, which are analyzing the voice and telling us this person is nervous, so it might be in a very critical situation, and we give to that person not the voice bot and asking what is your customer number, but we give to that person directly one of our experts in that area subject.
Yeah, that's a great application. Sort of a higher order application from a customer experience and interaction point of view. But you've actually dived into that third question of ours, which is, what are the medium to long-term implications of AI? What does the future hold? What does it mean for procurement? Kind of what's your hope of what's going to come through? If I were to infer from what all three of you have been sort of talking about the last 45 minutes or so, I think the interesting areas, I agree with you from an analytics perspective, there are tools out there. They're going to continue to get better and more productive, if I can use that term, in those tools. But I think the interesting areas are going to be in the areas of strategy, in the area of deeper insights and understanding, negotiations, Raul, as you mentioned, right? I think those are going to be interesting spaces where we're probably a little, I mean, there's some things that are out there, but I think we're still in the earlier stages of that sort of development today. Are those kind of, maybe those two areas, strategy, negotiation, prime areas for both of you? Sorry, there's my Apple balloons going off. I'm gonna have to turn that off.
Your birthday was last week, Homer.
It was last week. You've got to be very careful with your thumbs up or thumbs down, etc. with this new Apple setup. All right, but speaking of AI, but given that, so is strategy, negotiations, would those be kind of the prime areas, other areas that you're sort of looking at long term, where you have hope or potential for? Ashish, I'll ask you to maybe kick off.
If I may add, one other area which I'm particularly interested in is like supply chain mapping. For example, you are sourcing materials, you have like tier 1 and mapping to tier 2 and tier 3. There are some solutions available in the market, but again, I don't know how efficient are those solutions. That is very, very critical, not just for my part, most of the organizations. That is one area. And it sort of overall into like supply risk management. How do you manage like your supply chains? How do you see the risk? How do you minimize the risk? And, you take the right actions, if there is a risk, if risk happens, and what we are seeing today in the global market.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. I'm just making a note so I don't forget to talk about it. But like, particularly, I think risk clearly, from a SmartQ point of view, we've embedded AI into risk just because of the sheer value we can deliver from a content perspective, from a volume of data perspective, from an insight generation perspective, finding those needles in haystacks, if you will, right, from a risk point of view. I think this point of multi-tier visibility is a really, really hard problem to solve. But I think if there's any hope or any promise, I think that's an area where AI can play a pretty interesting role to help figure out and think through. So interesting aspects there. Raul, your thoughts?
Yeah, to pick up again this idea from some minutes ago, that we have certain phases. That first of all, it helps us is that we have an assistant, and then for me, the next step in the long term is that the system is taking over some tasks autonomously. And like we have it with the cars. First, you have the assistant, and then the cars driving by themselves. And there already is some solutions out where you have bots which can negotiate on very specific cases. And the thing is, at the moment, you have to customize them nearly for every and each case. But if you get more and more such of cases, or the bots know now more of those use cases, it will be getting interesting. Also, not only for small negotiations, but then also for bigger and bigger ones.
Yeah.
And to the
go on, please go ahead.
And the topic of strategy, I think in there, I see more that the AI will support us in building up our strategy. I don't see it at the moment, but for sure in some years, people will say I'm wrong, that the bot is redoing the strategy. I think I see it here more as a consultant.
Yeah, I think on this issue of strategy, that the issue is that there's too much diversity in our categories. There's too much differences in terms of the complexity levels, the experience levels that we've each got in different organizations. I think the strategy piece is an interesting potential area that I think will develop over time. The sort of underlying point that both of you have talked about that I think is really also fascinating is AI presents a potential for us to tap into the collective knowledge of our organizations, right? The question will be, how do you codify that? How do you put it all together in a way that you can tap into that knowledge? I think that's going to be exciting to see how we crack that nut, right? To me, that's fascinating. Graham, very quickly from you, thoughts around this? I know we have, as always, 12 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm going to move on and answer the third question. So I think I haven't a need to add very similar thoughts to the other guys.
So let's quickly put up poll number 3, and then let's go to our final question, and as we close out the next 10 minutes.
There we go. Okay, so this is looking longer term rather than short term. So what will be the top 3 impacts of AI on the future of procurement? So crystal ball gazing time. And you can answer more than one. Is it going to result in smaller procurement teams? Are we going to achieve increased savings? Are we going to be able to deliver additional non-monetary value? Will we have increased automation, a higher level of governance and compliance because of the controls that AI can offer? Are we going to get a greater understanding of the organization's spend, improved supplier relationship management, and greater levels of ethical and diverse sourcing because of the details and the analysis that can be done prior to decisions being made? So again, plenty of options there. It's more your gut feel. So extending from the conversation we've had, what direction do you think this is going in? We're not even asking for a time scale. We're just sort of really saying the sort of the future. So probably in the next 2 years or so. Yeah. Giving you a bit of time just to give some thought to that one. 128 of you have answered at the moment, so final few seconds if anyone else would like to contribute. Don't forget you can ask some questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get to them. If not, we'll follow up. And also, if anyone is wishing to sort of share one of the tools that they're using, by all means, put that in the chat. We've got a group, all the delegates on the call today are very much from procurement, so it's supporting the procurement folks. There's the result. Let me share the results of those. Again, don't take into account the percentages. So increased automation, leading to faster processing of stakeholders' needs, by far the largest, which is encouraging. That's what really we should be doing. Getting that greater understanding of organization spend, And then we've got a bit of a drop down in terms of ability to deliver non-monetary and ensuring higher level of compliance. So again, pretty much what we would expect, knowing the direction this is all going in.
Yeah. So let me dive right in. Given we've got 9 minutes, I want to dive into that last question. And it'll build off of these points in this last poll that we did. So what does all of this mean? What's the future for the organization, for teams, for their roles? What does it mean for CPOs versus category leaders versus the broader team? How do you expect the organization to change? And maybe I'll pick on that, Raul, what you said, if you can maybe start us there, this idea of autonomous tasks, right? And having, being able to take on that work from beginning to end. How do you sort of think about that? And how's that going to change our roles as procurement practitioners?
Yeah, so we have to understand how those AI works. Yeah, that's very important. We also should invest, some time in to build up some new skills. I think Ashish said already previously, prompt engineering is something which you should look to. This is quite interesting, and if you understand those skills, we can be building better AI. And more this no code is coming, so that means we do not really need IT specialists in all areas, and we will always need IT for sure, but we can do a lot by ourselves. But then we have to understand how it works, concepts, the systems.
There's an interesting survey I heard about recently where programmers, coders who leveraged AI to help them were 55% more efficient in the work that they were doing. And that has implications for numbers of people you need to be able to do different things. I think, there's an interesting point here around what does this then mean? Certainly there's an education aspect that needs to be there. There needs to be more learning. I think we have to probably reskill to a certain extent, right? And there's my next AI, my thumbs up. I knew that was going to happen. But I think it also has some implications in terms of how we think about the role. What do we do ourselves as procurement practitioners versus what can be self-serve out in our stakeholder community? Of course, what are we going to automate? How do we bridge the skill set gaps? And then there's maybe a more fundamental cultural change that has to happen in each of the individuals within our teams themselves, right? Because of this pretty seismic shift that is coming down the line. Ashish, your thoughts around this?
So I think it's hard to predict, what will happen, but one thing for sure, it's going to disrupt, it's going to change the way we are operating today. I love technologies, but sometimes I call them interruptions. But AI is moving from interruption to disruption. So it's going to disrupt how we are working. And Omar, you mentioned it's about like whether we are using AI to improve productivity, whether we are redefining the role. We will see that. And I've been reading lately that the future is not about titles. It's about the collection of tasks. It's about collection of skills. So maybe the future org structure will have one box as Procure GPT, so we might see that in the org chart, the GPT will become we always say like co-pilot, buddy, or +1. And I'll give a concrete example, which we are doing today, like redefining the roles. We talk about RFP, there are some solutions which can help you in supplier discovery, generating RFP questions, and on the supplier side, even, providing answers using some automated solution. So as procurement professionals, how do we redefine our role? So what I have done in some cases, I have stopped calling RFP as request for proposal, and I'm calling it request for partnership. Not in the legal sense, but more focusing on the people aspects, like building relationship, communication, collaboration. So the solution takes care of everything else, but we focus as a procurement professionals building those aspects. Like I always say, let's use AI, but let's not forget NI. I don't know what will happen 3 years down the line, but today, natural intelligence on the people side, let's try to redefine ourselves.
Yeah, 100% agree. Graham, your thoughts?
I'm almost coming from the point of view of almost what is procurement left with, and I'm going to use word relationships. So we can cover everything off with AI, but actually procurement has still got to be very efficient. The skill set, the people, it's that smaller team that's going to be managing the relationships with the stakeholders and with suppliers. Everything else ultimately going to be covered.
Yeah, I think that's broadly, I think that's actually right. I almost look at the future, and I'm not talking about the next 12 months, but certainly I think the medium to long term, you know, if we were to sort of conceptualize this, it's almost to the point where I'm going to be a little extreme in this, right? But the technical skills, hygiene factors, right? And in some cases, you know what, those technical skills, do you really need fundamental technical skills? Because the technology will take care of it for you, right? But what is always going to be needed is the ability to contextualize, the ability to think about outcomes, relationships, managing and working with stakeholders, which is really, if you think about it, at the end of the day, the core of what we're doing as procurement practitioners to drive value is delivering outcomes for all of our stakeholders. And that's really, at the end of the day, it's about relationships. It's about understanding the business. It's about understanding shareholder value and how we deliver to shareholder value. And I think what this is going to do is it's going to act as an accelerant towards this disruption idea, Ashish, that you've mentioned, as to where we're going. So I think we're in for a fascinating future. It's going to be pretty interesting. Raul, any other thoughts as we sort of think about this?
Yeah, I would just like to add one thing. If we talk now to our service providers, one important question would be, okay, are you using AI? And if not, why not? Because I would like to have the productivity from you. I would not to pay the high price because you're not able to use those productivity tools. Yeah. Just mention which we could take already in our tomorrow's work when we talk to our suppliers.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any space at all, and this is not just procurement, it's everywhere, where AI shouldn't be playing some role in driving productivity, effectiveness, efficiency, whatever you want to sort of think of it as. So look, super interesting. I think there's aspects of this conversation, there's things I couldn't get into around, will the procurement organization of the future be smaller? Will it be structured differently? Will we be reshifting those roles in different areas? Will certain roles die out? But we'll save that for another webinar in the future. Graham, we have 2 minutes. Any chance?
Oh gosh, we've got loads of sort of comments on this. To your knowledge, when do you expect the big ERP systems to incorporate AI modules? I think they are now to a certain extent. So I think that is available. So that was a nice quick one to ask. Tom is asking, Raul, you said you'd share some of those Chat GPT prompts. I don't know if you could put anything in the chat here, but that would be well received. Another question: how do you envisage AI transforming the art of negotiation with procurement? Can AI truly redefine strategies or enhance the outcomes in a real-world negotiation scenario? And is it a high risk? I guess that would be a good one to get a viewpoint on.
Quick thoughts from Raul and Ashish, both of you?
Sorry, I was searching for the prompt to put it into the...
You keep searching. Ashish, what's your thought on the negotiation support AI can deliver?
I think Raul has said, there are already some solutions which are, like chatbots are doing negotiations. But the way I feel is, it will help you, but eventually, finally, you need to take a decision. So it'll provide you the elements, it'll provide you the data, but at the end of the day, you need to do the negotiations. Yes, if it's like simple negotiations, then yes, it can be automated. But when we talk about the complex negotiations, you would still require, you will have all the elements, you will have like all the strategies, but at the end of the day, you need to negotiate. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah. I can add one thing. I was recently in discussion with a prompt engineer, so the guys who are building AI solutions, and I was explaining what I was doing in an online auction. I was telling I negotiate with my suppliers, and he asked, why do you negotiate with humans. Yeah. So he didn't understand that a bot negotiated with a human. So he said, why is not a bot negotiating with a bot? That would be much better and efficient. So I think this gave me some thoughts, and I think he's right. And my opinion is, yeah, in the future, bots will negotiate with bots and not humans anymore.
Yeah,
we will
I
just
think for certain categories, that's entirely possible. That's right. Well, look, I think we're over time now, but thank you, Raul, Ashish. Thank you for making time today. This has been a great conversation that could have gone on longer. Graham, as always, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who came on the call. We will be sharing the link separately. And I wish everybody happy holidays, and we will be back next year with more webinars. Thanks so much.